Hi, I am Sarah. I am a solo mother by choice and a volunteer with ARTFam, Assisted Reproductive Treatment Families of Australia. And I'm joined with Rhiannon.
Hello.
So Rhiannon is a volunteer with Donor Conceived Australia, so an organisation supporting donor conceived people across Australia as well. So thank you for joining us. So Rhiannon and I are just catching up tonight to follow on from an in-person event we held in Melbourne on the 15th of April, Donor Conception Conversations. And Rhiannon was one of our panellists at that event, which was amazing. We had over 100 people there. It was so great to have those really important conversations. And I guess the bottom line of all of these conversations is just best outcomes for our children and as they grow up. Anyone who's in this space, you're here because you're in one way connected to someone who is donor conceived, whether you be a recipient parent, whether you are donor conceived. So we're so excited to have a chat. Do you want to introduce yourself and your background?
Yeah. So hi, I'm Rhiannon. I'm 22 years old. I am currently halfway through a diploma of community services. So my history is in community services, disability, aged care, working with homelessness and food insecurity. I'm a perpetual student, so I'm always learning. And with DCA, I've generally just been helping with social media, creating the graphics you see on Facebook and Instagram. And when we had our second round, I decided to try and help out with directorship stuff, and here I am.
So I met Rhiannon through the donor conception space. So I have a child who's nearly 8 years old who I had on my own using donor sperm and donor conception. And I've loved hearing from the voices of donor conceived adults to know some of the things that I can do to help my daughter have better outcomes, have a better sense of identity. We're going to follow on with some questions from the event. And yeah, we might not get to all of the questions that were asked, but we're excited to share just some insight into what went on with those donor conception conversations. So one of the questions that was submitted at the event was, what has been your extended family's reactions and views of your mum having a child on her own with a donor?
Generally, my family had no issue with it. Actually, my mum's auntie is my godmother because she paid for the IVF treatment that conceived me. So generally, yeah, they're pretty happy with it.
You were saying earlier that your mum was pretty driven and pretty focused, and she just said she's going to do this, and so everyone was just kind of right. Well,
okay.
So the second question that was asked, I have no family support or people to help if I am a solo parent. How do I make this decision knowing if I will cope with single parenting? Is it irresponsible of me to pursue solo parenting without family support? What are your thoughts on that?
Coming from a community services standpoint, and I guess just as a human being, having a community is always going to be beneficial for you. And obviously any children that you have, working towards that before or during pregnancy will be really beneficial. No one knows if they're going to be able to handle parenthood until it smacks them in the face. Working on building that community will only ever be beneficial. And that community does not have to just be friends and family. It's doctors, it's midwives, it's GPs, it's counsellors, it's anyone who is there to support you.
Yeah, I think in Australia, we are very lucky. So every state has a different version. But in Victoria, we've got the maternal child health team who come and do your visits weekly and then monthly. You've got your GP. There's early parenting centres where if you're needing that extra support, you can go and stay for 4 nights, get that support around your early parenting. There's play groups. So you can create your village, join the Facebook groups, go to some of the face-to-face meetups, find your people so you're not feeling so alone. We discussed earlier, I have one child on my own with a sperm donor, and I also have a child when I was partnered, and that lonely and isolation, it came with both of them. It was in different ways, but even though I was partnered, I still felt that isolation and loneliness. So you never know what life's going to throw at you, but there's a lot of services in Australia and particularly Victoria that I'm aware of where you can get that support and that community. So yeah, thank you. When you met a sibling, did you have a feeling or connection before actually getting to know them as a person?
I always grew up kind of like imagining what it would be like to have my own little group of siblings around me, playing on the trampoline, running around the yard, having this group of people my age who shared my interests, who I had this inherent connection with. I tried to be logical about it though. You can't assume who someone is before you meet them.
Yeah.
So there's that logical side, but there's always that very human, very little small voice deep inside me that's going to fantasize about having this amazing relationship with all these siblings. And
So did you know as a
do that.
child that you had donor siblings? Did you know as a
Oh,
child there was people out there?
yeah, but I didn't think it was going to be as many as it was. I thought maybe it would be 5, 6.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely turned out to be many, many more.
My daughter loves just blowing minds off people when she tells them she's got 11 siblings. She finds it really entertaining to tell them.
Yeah,
11
I,
siblings
I,
and
my fun fact is always like, oh, I've got like 100 siblings, and people are like,
what?
huh?
So you've always just kind of had that feeling of connection. So how many of your siblings have you met?
I've only met 2 of them in person. I know the names of at least those 2 plus another 3, so that's 5.
Mhm.
And I do not recall how many there are, but I do have a list from New South Wales of confirmed births. And then in WA, we know of at least 2 more pregnancies. So
And are
there's
they all through
a
IVF
lot.
clinics?
I wouldn't say IVF. I know that my older sister wasn't IVF.
The donor donated at different clinics. Is that your
Just
understanding?
the one. So he donated in Perth, I think between 1991 and 1993. And then 10 years later, I was conceived in New South Wales.
Ah,
So yeah, all the donations were sent out. We know for sure across WA, as far north as Port Hedland, down to Kalgoorlie,
so
and
this
yeah, over eastern New
donation
South Wales.
was with one clinic, but sent to different locations within that clinic.
It was just kind of like, here's this medical research center that he donated at, and whoever got to like email received some. I suppose. I don't know the intricacies. It wasn't like a IVF Australia thing where you've got the same name, but yeah. I think I did a good job at answering that, but I hope that
No,
clarified.
no, no. It's interesting because I have the list of children born to the donor through the clinic I went through,
Mhm.
and that list is 11, including my daughter at the moment. And that's what I can tell her because that's the information I have. So it's just interesting to hear the different. That's why we have this conversation, isn't it? To open it up. And then when you met those 2, what was the feeling?
When I met my older sister, Emily, I met her at the airport. We'd been like video calling, I think, for a year prior. And so there was that connection. But like seeing her in 3D, I was like, whoa, like, why is your
Like
face
me?
that way?
Yeah.
What do you mean it's not flat, like on my phone? And then the next day, we drove another 3.5, 4 hours to another town and met our youngest sister who was raised by our donor. There was definitely that connection of, wow, like I feel like I've known these people my whole life.
My little one, I connected with another solo mum by choice who used the same donor. We found each other coincidentally through a Facebook group. I reached out to her, and our children met just before they were 3, and they just played. Only 4 months difference in the age. So there were the 3 of them. She's got twins, and I've got the one. They were almost 3, and the connection we observed was just fascinating. It was like just straight away they played and they were connected. We did not tell them about the connection at that point. We waited until they were about 4.5 before we told them the other family's mummy and I use the same donor, and so that makes them half siblings. And they were like, oh, okay. Now that they're 6, 7 years old, nearly 8, they call each other brother and sister. They have that relationship now. And it's only because of the conversations I've had with you and with other donor conceived adults that I went down that path. But we'll talk about that a little bit later anyway. So the next question we have, can you give any practical tips for donor conceived people or recipient parents for initial contact with donor or donor siblings?
It would definitely depend on the context of the situation. Obviously, the way that you approach someone who knows that they're donor conceived compared to someone who doesn't, you're going to want to say different things and have a different attitude. Look at the resources that are available online. A lot of the Facebook groups have people that have experienced these different approaches. They're able to talk about what it was like, whether they approached or they were the person who was approached. There's a lot of community groups just within Australia for donor conceived adults. A lot of the conversation there is, I've had a new sibling match. This person doesn't know they're donor conceived. This is new to me. How do I talk to them? Or, hi, I've just found out I'm donor conceived. you know, da 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 da, or hey, here's like a great story about how two people connected through the register, so they've both known that they were donor conceived.
And even ASMBC, there's lots of conversations between solo mothers by choice about connecting with donor siblings. ARTFam, we've had a couple of donors who have reached out, who have put their names out. So another resource we chatted about earlier was the donor registries. They can also provide counselling around those possibilities of connections, the possibility of meeting a donor, making sure it's done safely, making sure you're doing things thoughtfully, because you can go into it quite emotive and wanting the best outcomes. And this is a stranger. So whether it be donor siblings or donor registers can be, if you have them in your state, that can be a good place to start for resources as well as those online. Are there any similar groups to Australian Solo Mothers by Choice for sperm donor recipients for a same-sex couple? So your mum was a lesbian solo mother by choice. Are there any resources or any community groups that she was a part of?
I know that she was a part of the Council of Single Mothers and Their Children. Just amongst the LGBTQ queer community, there were always going to be people who had lived similar lives when it comes to like conceiving a child, or at least had lived part of it. Joining your community groups, getting to know people, and if they aren't in those groups themselves, chances are someone will know someone. It's a small world.
Rainbow Families is a good one. And also rainbow playgroups. So if your child is under school age, have a look on Playgroups Victoria website, and you can actually search by type of playgroup. And so looking for rainbow playgroups could be a good place to start as well. Finding that village who have walked a similar path to you. Now, our last question is a lengthy one, but there's a lot to cover. So we'll see if we can unpack it. I am in another Facebook group that is DCP led. And their ethos is that there is no ethical anonymous gamete donation. And best practice is for open donation or early contact with the donor, as genetic identity is important as who you're raised by. How can we best centre the identity needs of our children in a safe and structured way that protects ourselves as well as our children?
As you would with any other relationship, it's parent initiated. Any relationship that you have that involves your child, or any relationship you have that doesn't involve your child, should always be approached with a sense of understanding what you want from that relationship, having boundaries, keeping your own safety in mind. And obviously that goes for relationships with donors and donor siblings. It's good to have the beginning of those relationships young. I would agree that it is best practice to have an open ID or a known donor, or find who the donor is if you use an anonymous one, because I believe it was
Nick.
Yeah. He had an absolutely amazing point on this that said, like, kids don't meet their aunties and uncles when they're ready. They just meet them when they meet them because they're children, and the relationship is inherent. It's obviously still led with the child's safety and well-being in mind. The earlier you introduce someone into a child's life, the less confusing that it's going to be.
And that comes back to the early disclosure, doesn't it? If we let our children know from the start their story, their donor conceived, their family makeup, whatever that looks like, then it's just their normal. That's what they always know.
Just a fact of life.
It is, yeah. And that was your situation, wasn't it? You knew from the start. So with my daughter, I had the thought of, I will put my name down on the donor register, the central register, when she is ready, when she wants to, when she asks for it. But because I engaged with donor conceived adults and had these conversations, I realised that I could actually be depriving her of some really meaningful childhood relationships if I waited for her to be ready, because she doesn't know. It's my responsibility as her adult to give her the opportunity to know these people who are biologically connected to her. And so far, there are 2 children who we've met. I met with the mum just before the children were 3. We chatted online, we got to know each other, we made sure the other person was on the same page. Our children met and the connection was just amazing. And then when they were about 4.5, 5, that's when we told them the connection, that they were biological siblings. And now that they're nearly 8, they call each other brother and sister. And so if I had have waited until she was ready or initiated it, that's a childhood relationship she might never have had. So every family has to do what's right for them and what feels right, and you have to tread with caution. I feel very lucky that I met this family and we've had a positive outcome. So would that be your advice as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I would have loved to have had a relationship with my brothers and sisters from a much earlier age. Very, very lucky that I was able to begin at 17. No matter what the relationship is with anyone in your life or your child's life, the situation can change. It's not matter who that is, if it's an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, a sister, brother, donor, whatever.
I think safe boundaries are really important in all relationships. So if that relationship is with a donor who you've connected with or donor siblings, I think that's a really important message. The second part of this question, I am uneasy about doing DNA testing as I don't like the idea of my child's DNA being monetized, but also identifying other family members of the donor that may not know about the situation. So I guess this question is about they don't want to do the DNA testing. And also, what if family members of the donor who don't know they donated are now linked to this person's child? What are your thoughts on that?
I understand the hesitancy, especially with the monetization of the DNA. I was hesitant too. I would wait and bring up the conversation when the kid is old enough to make a knowledgeable decision and consent to that, understanding the consequences, good or bad.
I don't think that the recipient parent or the donor conceived person needs to take on that level of responsibility. It's focusing on your child, your immediate family. If that donor chose to donate without notifying and they are on the DNA websites, that's some of the outcomes of being on those websites. You may make connections with people that you didn't know existed, and some of them are celebrated and some of them are challenging to navigate. I appreciate your take on that because I have questioned myself, speaking with donor conceived adults, thinking, should I DNA test my child? And hearing your insight and waiting until she's ready, she's old enough to understand, she's old enough to consent. Our names are on the voluntary register, we're on the central register. So if others are wanting to connect, they will also be on the register. Unfortunately, there's a lot of families who still don't tell their children they're donor conceived, different family circumstances, who are not on the registers, and that's their choice as well. But anyone who wants to connect, I think, can through the registers in the states that they exist. All right, now if you had one takeaway for recipient parents, those considering donor conceived people, what's your one takeaway, the one thing that's just been like, this was a highlight of my life?
Truth telling from the very beginning meant so much. There have been so many times that I've just been incredibly grateful for the knowledge that I had growing up. In a perfect world, I would have known my siblings, but I didn't know that they were out there. And that is a lot better than a lot of other donor conceived people can say that they experienced. Honesty and integrity, truth telling is.
Be proud.
You gotta do anything, you gotta do that.
Be proud. So I appreciate that so much. I have taken away so much from this conversation. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Have more chats in the future. We will be doing more follow-ups from donor conception conversations. We'll be having a chat with Melissa from Egg Donation Australia. She's an egg donor. We'll also hopefully be having a chat with one of the sperm donors who are attending the event. So thank you, and we will chat again soon.